What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in, and today we're going to be talking about the very unfortunate and tragic case of Jazmine Barnes, a 7-year-old girl who was shot near a Walmart, and some of the coverage associated with the case. So a few days ago, near a Houston Walmart, 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes was shot and killed. Now, this case got a lot of publicity thanks to activist Shaun King, and you can see in his tweet here, which really kind of started all the publicity, you can see him say here, "Urgent, all hands on deck. A 40-year-old man with a beard in a red pickup truck pulled up on 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes and her family near a Houston Walmart and shot and killed her and injured others. I am joining the search for her killer and have a $25,000 reward. Need him now." And you can see there's pictures of her and there's this red truck in the corner. Now that was January 1st. January 4th, he tweets this. "What more can you tell me about Robert Cantrell? He was arrested in Houston hours after Jazmine was murdered on another violent crime spree. We've had 20 people call or email us and say he is a racist, violent asshole and always has been. Just tell me everything you know." And you can see he shows the picture of the suspect there. Now, also on January 4th, just a few hours later, he retweets a sketch of a suspect that looks like this. "Jazmine's sister saw the suspected shooter and remembers this. He just looked sick. His face was thin and really pale, and his eyes were blue. This is a police sketch of him. He's still on the loose." Now, as you can see from the two pictures, the different suspects involved are both white, and people are looking for a white male who killed this girl. Now, let's see what was announced today, January 6th. Shaun King retweeted this. "Happening now. Sheriff says suspect in the murder of Jazmine Barnes was arrested through tips from the community and journalist Shaun King. This is what happens when we can all work together to bring justice." And you can see the picture of the two suspects. And a tweet earlier from Shaun King that day said this. "After Woodruff and Black shot and killed Jazmine Barnes, 4 credible independent eyewitnesses heard the shooting and saw a white man in a red truck speed off. It appears that man was an innocent bystander who fled, actually fearing for his life as well. He was not the shooter." Now, you have to give Shaun King a lot of credit here. He actually was really involved in this case, and he brought a lot of resources together. He even offered up to $100,000 to anyone who offered information that led to the arrest of the suspects. And it seems, according to some of the reporting that I'm reading, that he really did help bring these people to justice. So you got to give him a lot of props for that. But the issue that I have here is his motivations behind starting this whole campaign. You see, Shaun King is an activist, and he usually deals with racial matters, anything where it's black versus white, white versus black sort of stuff, usually in one direction. But anything that involves, racism, that's what he likes to cover. So it seems like his motivations are more political starting off with this case. And that's why when he tweeted out his first tweet, it was about a white suspect. Now, I'm just going based off what I've seen in the past from Shaun King. But if this was indeed a black suspect, I don't think he would be tweeting this out, because that happens all the time. And you don't really see Shaun King tweeting about trying to find a black suspect, initially, if that's what the story is. But if it's a white suspect killing someone who's black, especially a child, then, that was his initial motivation getting in. Now, again, the outcome is desirable. He put his resources behind it. And even after, signs led towards the suspects being black, it's not like he stopped, and he did put the resources there to bring these people to justice. But it's just the motivation behind, it's just the death of a 7-year-old girl should be enough. The death of a 7-year-old girl being murdered and those suspects being unknown should be enough for you to want to cover this. It shouldn't have to be the suspect is might be white for you to want to cover this. Regardless of the race, a 7-year-old girl died. That matters. That should be important. And you should report on that anyway if you have the resources and you can do that. But I don't want to rag on Shaun King too much, because it does seem like he did help bring these people to justice. But the people I really do have a problem with here is the Young Turks. Now, even after the suspects were revealed and it was shown that it was 2 black suspects, and this information came out hours and hours and hours ago. But TYT, after this information was already available for hours, put out a video that showed the sketch picture of the white suspect and said, "We need to find this." And they were criticizing the media for not covering it enough, even though in the video, they're mentioning how the media is covering it. So let's take a look at a few clips.
Been almost a week since 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes was shot and killed in Houston, Texas, and her killer is still to be found. Despite a $100,000 reward offered by Sean King and attorney Lee Merritt, the perpetrator of this atrocity remains at large. Which does beg the question, why is there not more coverage of this horrific tragedy? And that's not to say there hasn't been any coverage. Outlets such as CNN and NBC have dedicated substantial airtime to help identify the suspect and shed light on the death of this sweet young girl. But of course, outlets like Fox News, well, they gave Jazmine's murder a solid 30-second blip.
So here you can see him mention how the media is not covering this enough, but CNN and NBC did cover it, but how Fox News didn't cover it, even though he said they did cover it with a 30-second blip, even though there's actually news articles as well on their website covering this issue. So I don't know why he wants to make it this sort of, left-right type of issue.
But if you are waiting for the president to lend his substantial reach to help identify the suspect, well, I wouldn't hold my breath unless there are murmurs of the suspect being a Muslim or an immigrant or Elizabeth Warren.
So then he uses this opportunity to attack the president, thus politicizing this issue even more and basically using it as another opportunity to attack Trump because that's kind of what their outlet does. And he said that the only way this would get attention is that if the suspect was Muslim or an immigrant or something like that, or Elizabeth Warren. Oh, haha, very funny. But let's be honest, the only reason the Young Turks is covering this is because the suspect fit a profile that they were interested in. The suspect, in their mind, was a white person. If the suspect was black, TYT would have never covered this story. So like I said, TYT uploaded this video after information was already out for many, many hours. Francis Maxwell, the guy you see in the video, even on his Twitter account, tweeted out the suspects, the two black men who were found to be the actual people who committed the murder. And he tweeted that out as this video went live. It was already live, after he tweeted that out. So here's my issue. It's not that they're covering this story. This story absolutely should get the coverage it deserves. When a 7-year-old girl dies, regardless of the race of who the 7-year-old girl is or what the race of the suspect might be, it's an important story to cover. I can't really think of any situation that deserves more priority than a child being murdered in this country. But the motivation's what really bothers me. When the Young Turks doesn't cover the homicides of other children when the suspects are black or maybe the suspects are even unknown, they don't cover it, but they cover this case. And this is really where the media hypocrisy comes in, because they always want to criticize others and hold themselves up as these like moral paragons who are always looking out for the interests of people. And, maybe you have, racist police officers or other people who don't care. And it's just so dishonest because they're the real hypocrites themselves, because they're actually not covering the dozens and sometimes even hundreds or thousands of stories similar to the ones that they're covering every single day. They don't cover those stories because it doesn't fit the narrative that they're looking for. It's not juicy enough because they don't want just another murder. If it's just like, oh, well, it's black on black crime. Well, if the suspect's black, like that happens all the time. Well, if it's a white guy killing a black girl, then you can sort of market that. You can market the racism, the potential racism, the racial conflict involved, and that generates more clicks, more ad revenue, more controversy. And, it goes to the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. But in this case, if it's racist blood, it leads even more. But when it comes to this issue of media hypocrisy, I think Chief Flynn of the Milwaukee Police Department actually put it best back in 2014.
What's your response to some of the people that thought you were being disrespectful by being on your phone and not being attentive to them?
Well, I was on my phone, and yes, that's true. I was following developments with a 5-year-old little girl sitting on her dad's lap who just got shot in the head by a drive-by shooting. And if some of the people here gave a good goddamn about the victimization of people in this community by crime, I take some of their invective more seriously. The greatest racial disparity in the city of Milwaukee is getting shot and killed. Hello. 80% of my homicide victims every year are African American. 80% of our aggravated assault victims are African American. 80% of our shooting victims who survived their shooting are African American. Now, they know all about the last 3 people that have been killed by the Milwaukee Police Department over the course of the last several years. There's not one of them can name one of the last 3 homicide victims we've had in this city.
And I think Chief Flynn really hit the nail on the head there. I mean, he really attacked the media's hypocrisy on this issue, saying, well, you know what? You don't know what I was doing on my phone. In fact, I was dealing with a case that you guys aren't even covering. And it's this really bad case. For example, a 5-year-old being shot in the head in a drive-by shooting. In fact, this is the case he was talking about. 3 men arrested after 5-year-old Milwaukee girl shot dead sitting on grandfather's lap. Now, this shooting happened in 2014, and the suspects weren't arrested until 2015. This is the case of 5-year-old Layla Peterson. Now, did TYT cover this when it happened? Because I looked for it and I couldn't find it. You know, even though I'm pretty sure they covered the shooting that the reporters were talking about, where it was the meeting that the chief was actually present for, because, you know, it's cops against blacks, and that's an interesting story for them, and that's their agenda. That's like what they like to cover. But when it comes to a 5-year-old girl being shot in a drive-by shooting, the media didn't care to cover it. TYT didn't cover it. Where was the coverage of TYT on that? Where was the coverage on that, Francis Maxwell? How come you didn't cover that? Here's another case also from Milwaukee. 50 years for Darmaque Cohill in death of baby Bill Tao. The criminal complaint says Cohill fired into a home near 73rd and Mill Road on December 27, 2014. 13-month-old Bill Tao was playing with toys in the living room of that home. Tao was struck as shots were fired into the home. He died. Where was TYT's coverage of this story? Did it exist? Because I checked and I really couldn't find it. I tried my best. It didn't exist. Again, this is what really bothers me. It's this hypocrisy. It's the inconsistency. You go after this story pretending you're being virtuous because, oh, a 7-year-old girl died. That's absolutely important. But you're only covering it because the suspect you thought was white. And it's just really gross, honestly. Like, I'm not trying to virtue signal here, but the death of a 7-year-old girl should really be enough on its own merits, regardless of, like I said even earlier, I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself, but regardless of the race of the girl, you know, 7-year-old girl, or the race of the supposed suspect, just treat it for what it is. Anyways, guys, I want to know what you guys think. Do you think I'm just making a big deal out of this, or do you think some of what I've said is valid here? Let me know in the comments down below. I don't even want to do the outro, but just, you know, that's it. That's the end of the video, guys. Thanks for watching.